How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we got a good discussion today. We're going to talk about disenfranchised staff. This is a very important topic right now because I know a lot of facilities are dealing with staff who are currently disenfranchised. Basically, they need a win. They need a win. And my guest today is going to be Joe Pomponio. And we're going to just talk about, what it's like to go through this. And as a leader, what you can possibly do to lift the spirits of the downtrodden, if you will. But guys, this is definitely a needed discussion because this is actually happening probably all across the country, if not internationally, to our brave men and women who are working the floor. Now, guys, real quick before we start the show and before I introduce Joe, I got a couple of books on the market. Guys, if you haven't gotten a chance, please pick up this book, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. This book is used for training all across the country. Thank you guys who have been supporting this book. And if you guys are interested in purchasing it, it is on Amazon.com. And the link to that is in the description. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. This book is doing very well. I'm very happy. This book is available by Blue 360 Media. This book doesn't just have advice from me, but it's got advice from other professionals in the field. And check this out, guys. I am going to be speaking at a conference in South Carolina for the jail administrators. And this book is going to be given to all the attendees, which is pretty cool. And that conference is going to be in September. I will be the keynote speaker, and I'm excited. And if you come to that conference, you will get a free copy of this book. And now also, guys, to partner with these two books, I also have this one that just came out from the same publisher, Blue 360 Media, and it's called Tips for New Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors. This book is also doing very well. I'm actually going to read you a little something that one of the readers sent my way, which really it got to me, guys. This is definitely the reason why I write these books. And again, guys, if you're interested in getting this book, it's available at Blue 360 Media. The link to this is in the description. And this is what it says. It comes from Stacy. I received my new book from this amazing author today. Wow, what a great book. And the information is fantastic. Gangi has implemented inputs from other correctional officers from around the world in this book, along with his experiences. I'm so glad that we crossed paths a couple years back. The information that has been shared and spoken on this profession has been a game changer. I can honestly say that your books have taught me new ways of doing my job as a corrections officer. I highly recommend all three of Gangi's books, as well as his YouTube channel, Tier Talk. You won't be disappointed. This is just pretty awesome to hear this. I promise you that. Thank you, Anthony Gangi, for being a mentor and a world of knowledge to myself and to others in the field of corrections. You truly are an inspiration and an amazing asset to have in the correctional field. And I also have one more I wanted to read you. This comes from a sergeant from the Chilean County Jail. His name is Jason Croswitz. And it says, as a young CO, I would hear the locks and the bang of the doors. Now I don't hear the doors bang or clang. What I do hear is when a door or gate softly shuts and it doesn't secure. To me and most seasoned correctional officers, it's like a bomb going off. I also remember my first time in a unit. I said the same thing. What the hell did I get myself into? Anthony Gangi, you hit the nail on the head. I have said this before. This is outstanding, and all the COs should read it, even old dogs like myself. And he was actually mentioning a part. I don't know if you guys can see a part in the book that's titled, This Still Gets to Me Every Time. And that's basically when that door shuts. And this is this is why you do it, guys. I'm actually currently working on a leadership book now. That's just more of my own personal thoughts. That book's going to take a while because I am really weeded in trying to come up with different topics that have not been discussed before, but also can partner well with the books we have. So if I'm going to revisit a thought, it will be with a different perspective or totally something new. But these books are always meant to work in partnership. So if you don't have something in the book you're currently reading, then there may be something in the other two that I have out or the one that's coming out. Let me get Joe on. What's up, Joe Pomponio?
What's up, brother?
Joe, if I may say, before we introduce you, I see some stuff behind you by that star. What would that be there?
That would be the some of the passages I was lucky enough to have in your books, both of them. both how to succeed in corrections and the new ones, the tips and tricks for correctional officers and their supervisors. Man, it's something I'd never thought I'd see, and something I'm proud of, man. I'm blessed to be a part of that journey, brother. I can't thank you enough.
And I have two people a part of my next journey in the new book on the leadership book, which I know a lot of people are excited to get their hands on once it comes out. My dream for that is going to be a little hardcover and just a daily read for the day. I have asked Joe, and he has agreed. He is going to do my introduction, and I've also asked Kevin Orlick to go ahead and do the forward. And I may have Russ do the conclusion, and then the passages will strictly be me. I'm not going to put any quotes above. The reason why is because I want these passages to really be discussion worthy, and I don't want to be obsessive with trying to cover every detail. I want to kind of put just enough thought out there just to kind of gain some momentum so we can get the dialogue going. Even if you agree or not with the perspective, the point is it's really meant to engage a dialogue to grow from. But also, if you don't agree, let's see, a little bit from your perspective. And Joe, again, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Corrections, so 29 years and 6 months. Currently working as an assistant jail administrator in our local sheriff's department in the jail division, and a panel member here on Tier Talk.
Yes, and we love having you. Now, real quick, today's topic is going to be about dealing with disenfranchised staff. I want to read something to you guys. Now, this is going to be in my book coming out next year, but I came up with this thought recently, and then I thought this would be worthy of a show. But this is what I wrote. As a leader in corrections, the last thing you want to have occur in your workplace culture is the cultivating of a disenfranchised workforce. On a balance scale, the more disenfranchised the workforce, the more the scale tips towards the entitlement of inmates. Entitlement in this context is the belief that one is inherently deserving of privileges or specialized treatment. Sometimes disenfranchised staff can come across as appearing lazy because on the surface they lack effort and motivation. But if you look just a little bit deeper, they're not lazy or lack motivation. They're just weary from losing battle after battle. They're tired of seeing the scale constantly tip in the other direction. Basically, they're just mentally exhausted and physically beaten. They need a win. They need a reason to keep fighting. As a leader, pushing them to give more would be like draining blood from a stone. It's just not happening. It will only demotivate them and force them even faster into a downward cycle of hopelessness and even depression. At this point, as a leader, know now that the effort is on you to produce, to motivate. You need to tip the scale of empowerment back into the hearts of the people you lead. In short, if you have disenfranchised staff, you will have entitled inmates. And when you have a workplace culture that produces that type of dynamic, the house will eventually fall. I wrote that, Joe, because I was on site where I work and I saw it. I saw a concern that the officers of the past would have jumped on to handle, but then I kind of saw them just kind of a little bit stepped away from it. And at first you're thinking, man, why aren't these guys just doing what they got to do, man? Come on, guys, move. But my mindset was as if they were lazy or just didn't care. And that wasn't the case. In context, they just were defeated because the incident that was unraveling in front of me happened thousands of times before. And it's just, they just cannot get the win or do anything long-term for it to stop happening. Joe, let's talk about disenfranchised staff. And do you believe that the more that staff become disenfranchised, and especially the times now, what we're going through with the changes that are being pushed without the consideration of what we could add to it, do you feel like ultimately that could lead to inmates who feel entitled?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our main job is to cultivate motivation and morale on the shift. And, we're also there to support our staff. If we're not supporting staff, even there's going to be times where the officer's in the wrong, but still you got to support your staff anyway, especially in front of the offender population. If you don't, it definitely gives the inmates a sense of entitlement, and it also, puts that thought in the officer's mind that these inmates are entitled. You know, our job is to enforce rules and regulations. You know, as leaders, we're there to cultivate motivation within our ranks and our staff, you know, amongst our supervisors, amongst the COs. And, you know, it's a must, you know, and when you not so much laziness, but, you know, disenfranchised could be, you know, can come from a variety of things. It's not just, you know, lack of leadership support. You know, complacency. If you allow the officers to be complacent for a long enough period of time, it can cause them to be disenfranchised. You know, if you don't include them, if you don't challenge them, if you don't motivate them, you know, that's all grounds for, you know, officers being disenfranchised.
Yes, and I got to add something, Joe, because you're 100% correct. I think disenfranchised staff usually result because you have gradually accepted things as the way they're going to be and will always be. And now you just no longer fight. You know, there's no longer the effort. And I think corrections, we are truly defined by effort over outcome. It really is, because we don't have control of the outcome, but that doesn't mean that we stop trying, you know, to commit to the effort. I mean, you could see staff disenfranchised when they write charges and they don't stick. And, you know, all of a sudden, I'm not going to write charges anymore. Screw it. And then you go back and you say, hey, well, hold on about that. You know, your number one purpose in this profession is to hold people accountable. You know, your job is to hold inmates accountable. So now think about this, guys. Do you get to a point where you're so disenfranchised that you're willing not to do your job anymore? Think about that. So having said that, this is one advice just on a personal level before we talk about leadership's input, is that you cannot allow yourself to get to the point where you're so disenfranchised that you no longer do your primary functions. So having said that, I know we'll talk about support, don't get me wrong, but this part's on you. The effort part is on you. Regardless of the outcome, you got to continue to do the effort, because the moment you stop doing the effort is the moment, regardless of you consciously or subconsciously, whatever it is, you have accepted things the way they are. And now it only becomes worse, because once you accept it, there's no longer any resistance. And now it gets worse. The battles are just totally one-sided at this point. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, even though it's the responsibility of leadership to help motivate the people underneath, you know, ultimately it's a self responsibility. It's our jobs as individuals to motivate ourselves. You know, even if we're not motivated about the job, we find a different aspect of the job to motivate us, to keep us going. You know, you shouldn't just, you know, give it the what they call the fuck it, I'll just go along to get along attitude. You know, because again, that leads to complacency, it leads to shortcuts, it can lead, you know, it just leads to more problems than it does solutions. You know, it's our responsibility as individuals to self-motivate. You know, I've even as a supervisor, there's been times where, you know, I wasn't motivated in any way, shape, or form because of people above me. And, you know, that's when I had to sit back and think, okay, well, if I can't do this, let me do this. You know, it was my responsibility as an individual to motivate myself, because if I'm not motivated, nobody underneath me is going to be motivated.
Yeah, and Joe, you made a good point about something. So, as I mentioned before, guys, the effort to remain motivated really is on you, because I think you'll be the first person that is in the best position to realize you're not motivated, because you know your intent. So on the surface, we may think you're lazy because we don't see you moving or committed to effort. But having said that, you know that you're basically, it's not that I'm lazy, I just given up. So granted, leaders can help provide an environment that keeps you motivated. But with that said, I'm not going to give them 100% responsibility on keeping you motivated. I think a big part of that is you. So I won't even say 50-50. I would say 30-70. 30 being leadership, 70 being you. Now, some people are like, whoa, that's no way, Gant. I disagree with that. I'm going to say the reason why I'm giving it that percentage, because I would actually go a lot higher. I'm actually thinking in my head 95-5. but I want to be fair in my discussion, but still give the higher percentage to staff, is because, believe it or not, your effort and your motivation is truly on you, not on anybody else. So yes, I can go ahead and provide a great environment as a leader, but if you don't have it within you to stay motivated, that environment won't do nothing. So having said that, I'm going to shift it where 70% is on you and 30% is on leadership. But again, I still feel it's a lot more effort on you, but I want to be fair in what that perspective is. So again, I like this part of the discussion, Joe, because I think this is where corrective action is. Because if you have a leader that's coming in and wanting to lift spirits, even though like, okay, I can't control everything around me, but maybe I can do something with the staff and communicate with them and try to build some inspiration or some good momentum in the right direction. But if staff's not willing to hear it and then go back and say, yo, management's still the problem, that's unfair. That's unfair. So I think, honestly, the effort really, I would like to say would be a partnership, but I really got to put more effort on the front line at this point to, even though you're going through these battles that may be tough, you can never allow for someone to take that motivation from you to the point where you're not willing to do your job. And also another reason on top of that is when you're not willing to do your job, when you're demotivated from doing your primary functions, your safety and security, the safety and security of your peers, everything is at risk. So if that's not a motivator that must stay within you all times of the day that you're in the shift, then maybe you're not meant to be in this profession, sad to say. Joe, what's your thoughts about that balance? Your call. I mean, leadership, front line. I mean, where do you give the onus of motivation to?
For me, it's more of a 60-40 thing.
Right.
I'd say 50-50, but in all reality, I would say it's 60-40, 60% of the employee and 40% of the management. We've all been assigned to new facilities or new shifts where, my last, I was put on, night shift as a lieutenant because the warden's like, hey, that we've had a lot of call-ins on a shift. We got a lot out on FML. You're a seasoned lieutenant, man. Go in there and put your eyes in there and see what the hell's going on. And, I went to this shift, and by the third night, I mean, no matter what, you could hear crickets in this room and everybody's heads down. And, the third night I sent my sergeants both my sergeants had a turnout, just kicked them out. Told them, get out, shut the door, go smoke a cigarette, go do something, but just get the hell out of my turnout. And, I told the COs, I said, I'm going to ask you a question. There's no wrong answer. And what you say to me in this room stays in this room. And I asked them, I said, why do I come in here and all of you look like you've been kicked in the fucking gut? What is going on? And, the COs are, a couple of them kind of opened up a little bit. And then, when two opened up, the rest of them opened up, and they're like, hell, you're the first lieutenant we've seen come to a shift briefing. We just feel like we're not learning anything. It's the same old shit every day. We're getting told we're not doing this. We're getting told we're not doing that. We never seem to do anything right. It's one of those things where, I had a deep come to Jesus meeting with my two sergeants that were assigned to me on that shift. And, and like I told them, I said, you guys not speaking up are part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. And that, that shit ends today. So, from that point on, I went in there and I challenged them. I gave them a scenario. You guys tell me what you would do in this situation. It all comes down to the point where, the administration noticed a calling pattern on this shift. Within 4 months, we went from a shift that, averaged a turnout of maybe 13 officers a night with 6 call-ins, 3 out on family medical leave, 2 out on workers' comp, 3 out on leave without pay. Within 6 months, we were a shift that wasn't even utilizing overtime. And, the use of force scenario that I was telling you about earlier that I had prior to my leaving was on that shift. And I can tell you the day that use of force happened, they were probably the most high-spirited shift I've ever seen in my career. And all they wanted to do was learn and be involved. They just wanted to feel like they didn't feel like they were being complacent. They felt like they were part of the team. They felt like they had the knowledge. They felt like they had the skill, and that's all, the subordinates really ask, is that they be included, to be part of the solution, to be part of, whatever problem it is that you're working on. They, give them the end, make them, part of whatever, solution that you're working towards. Cause you can, even though you have a solution on your own, you can find that you'll never enact it on your own. You have to have the help of everybody underneath you or beside you or above you. It's not something that you can do yourself. And, just that alone turned the whole entire shift around. They came in with their heads up every day. They came in laughing, joking. We would have some fun in the shift briefings. 80% of the time, we were talking about scenarios. We were talking about policies. We were talking about the what if game. We were talking about, uses of force, is just everything. And, when it came down to it, they were left out. They were never part of the solution. The prior supervision treated them as part of the problem.
And guys, you know what, Joe, you got a lot of good points here, because when you talk about the solution, listen, guys, there could be disenfranchised staffs that could get motivated situationally, like, hey, Joe is getting assaulted, I'm going all out, and that's usually situationally driven. So at that point, the situation kind of pushes you forward. And I'll be honest with you, if you work with staff when the situation requires action, and there is no, talk about immediate action, like, my boy Joe is being assaulted, and you sit there and don't move, that's not disenfranchised staff. Let's just get that out there. That's an emergent situation, which automatically draws that immediate response. I think that's something that should be in your heart, that automatically you react to. I would like to think that. But granted, there are times where you impact the environment, where you initiate what needs to be done. And I think that's where you start to see the disenfranchised staff, because it's like, hey, why aren't you talking to that inmate? Or, hey, why aren't you doing more searches? Or, whatever it is, why aren't you initiating, playing the role? And then that guy, I'm done with it. Like, I'm done with it, because I see disenfranchised staff. I would like to say this: disenfranchised staff may only do just enough. If that makes sense, where in corrections, we require that extra initiative. So I think if it's driven by the situation that requires you just to do enough, then you're not going to be able to see if someone's disenfranchised or not, because I do believe they're going to respond and do what needs to be done. I think it's when a situation requires them to go above and beyond or initiate chasing after something. Basically, let me get on that, where you lose out on that initiative. And then once you don't see your staff taking the initiative, we have a problem. I think we definitely have a problem. If you're not taking an initiative when dealing with the inmate population, let's be honest, guys, the moment you're not taking the initiative, they are. And that makes us totally reactionary. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you're not taking the initiative, the offender population definitely is. If we're not being proactive, we're being reactive. And when we're being reactive, the inmate population is being proactive. So that's, having the initiative to do the job is one of the strong points. We've all worked and been with people that, just did the bare minimum to, bring a conclusion to a situation. And I agree, we don't need how did I describe it? We don't need a part-time, full-time employee in that book.
Yes.
We need somebody with the drive, the loyalty, and the dedication.
Yes.
Not everybody has the verbal appreciation for employees with those skills. I always have been. Corrections is not one of those professions where it's good to have a part-time, full-time employee. Because when shit hits the fan, who's going to be there? You got to wonder about that. Who your part-time, full-time employees are. You know who the coworkers are who are actually going to do it and have your back, or the ones that are going to sit on the trash can lids and not get involved. That this is the wrong profession for that kind of shit, because
And,
as short as we are nationally, we're all that we have.
Joe, you made a good point on something too about being there. Corrections, you're going to be dealing with a lot of situations that are ambiguous in nature, because again, you're dealing with human behavior that could totally be a little wacky at times, and it's hard to predict. We have an understanding to some extent, and we're prepared. But again, you're prepared to react. But sometimes you got to figure it out on the fly. And disenfranchised staff that don't take the initiative can actually leave the ball dropped for quite some time, which can make the problem more complex. So I think that we kind of discussed it in the show last week, I think it was, where you want people to take initiative. And that's one of the reasons why, because if you're not taking initiative, the ball has not been picked up. And at somewhere along the line, the problem's just growing in its complexity. Now, as a supervisor, as a leader, or someone that's, got that responsibility over others, I realized something that day when I was looking at the staff and I was looking at a concern, and I was wondering why there wasn't an immediate attempt at the concern. When I realized that they were just kind of beaten, I really do think that's the word. And in context, it's something that I recognized immediately. Because again, granted, if I wasn't familiar with what's going on, then obviously there's no context. I would just see staff as like, yo, what the hell? If I was new coming in and I didn't know the context of, what's happening, I'm going to think they're lazy. I'm just going to think a lot of things that are wrong. That's why it's definitely good to have people who don't just know their people, but also know the situations that they're facing, because my response to them is really dependent on not just how I know my people, but how I know how they're dealing with the situations that have come their way. So when I look at the context, I do see staff that they're choosing maybe not to respond because they're just beaten, but they may not even know they're not responding. It's just they've gotten to the habit of just slowly accepting defeat. So at first you lose by an inch, 2 inches, a feet, a yard, a mile, whatever it is. But it does start off slow, and then it gradually becomes that way. Each time you give a little, it mounts up. Maybe at one point they go after it. The next point they start yelling at the inmate, and then the next point, but that doesn't happen in one. It happens slowly, where each lack of effort technically gets accepted gradually. But with that said, as a leader, if I know that my people are not responding because they're disenfranchised, then my approach to get them to move forward is going to be different. Like if I don't know the context and I just think that they're being lazy and what's going on, I'm going to try to rip on them. Because like, what are you doing? Let's go. And again, whatever the case may be, my approach is just going to be to push them forward, because I don't know if they're disenfranchised. I don't know what the context is. But now, knowing the context, and I see staff like that, now, as long as it's not emergent, it's more of something that, okay, we got some time to make an approach on, because emergent something different. But having said that, if I feel that they are disenfranchised, my pushing them forward, to try to, push that authority compliance will only forward, kind of push them downwards quicker, because at this point they're just not motivated. So I like the phrase I said in what I wrote, where you can't drain blood from a stone. So I think at this point here, it's not about me pushing them to produce. It's about me producing for them. What can I do to get them motivated, to get buy-in? Now, Joe, this is what matters. If you got a supervisor that cares, I'm only going to be able to do so much, and I need you guys to give me something back. That's fair. If I'm trying, you guys want to, not, oh, screw it, I give up, blah, 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 and I keep on trying. Well, guess who starts to get demotivated as well? Me. Why not? That's fair. Why can't I be disenfranchised? right? Why not? You know, because I'm trying to get them moving. They're not moving. You know why? Because they're not giving me the effort. It's not about outcome, guys, because I know outcome is not in our control. But if I'm giving effort and you're not giving me effort in return, why can't I be disenfranchised? Now, let's be fair. We're all human, regardless of our rank. You know, we're all human. So why can't I feel what you're feeling? So having said that, if you want for me to try to give you as much as I can a win or try to give you a win, then maybe when I'm trying and you don't want to get up, maybe you should also look my way and say, maybe I need a win. Because the last thing you want is for the person in the middle to be disenfranchised. Let's not forget about that. Because that person in the middle is the one that has to translate and motivate. Translate and motivate. Translate and motivate. So now when you got something in the middle that stops me from motivating, well, then I start to get tired. I start to give up. And now that brings the problem further down. There's a lot there, Joe. There's a lot there. So what's your thoughts on one, you know, again, playing the leader and knowing when to add pressure? This may not be a time for it, but also front line kind of meeting us somewhere in the middle and then keeping us motivated as middle management.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as a leader, it's our job to motivate. You know, what I used to call motivational complacency is one of the most dangerous things to have, you know, in the corrections profession. You know, our job is not only to help produce, it's to help motivate and, you know, cultivate a difference, you know, within the environment. You know, there were times where, you know, that same shift, you know, the two sergeants were even kind of disenfranchised. And, you know, I came in, I don't know, it was probably a week after that turnout that we had. And, you know, I threw down the shift roster and told one of the sergeants, you know, go ahead and make a shift roster out for tomorrow. And he looked at me, man, and his eyes were wide open. I'm like, what's the matter? It's a shift roster. He's like, Lieutenant, I've never made a shift roster. Wait a minute, what? You've been a sergeant how long? What the hell do you mean you've never made a shift roster? Well, the lieutenant's always done it. Well, not anymore. You're gonna make a shift roster. You know, even the sergeants were disenfranchised because of the lack of, you know, they had no bounds of authority. They didn't know where their authority began and where it ended. You know, and I've never been a glory hog on power or anything else. You know, I've fully have been the type of individual where I wanted to teach those underneath me, even COs, you know, what my job functions are. This way, later on down the road, if they choose to promote, they remember what I taught them. Not just that, but in the decisions I made, they can understand. They're like, okay, well, Lieutenant did this because it's a classification thing. You know, your normal COs don't know nothing about classification. But if you pass enough knowledge off to the staff underneath you, they begin to understand why you make the decisions that you do. That's our job. Our job is to teach these folks underneath us, to give them the whys and the hows to what decisions I make. You know, it's one of them things that if you're not taking the lead, if you don't have the passion or the drive to help drive these people, and, you know, sometimes it's positive pressure, sometimes it's negative pressure, but that's part of the job. It's our responsibility to apply both sometimes. It may not be what they want to hear, but it's the truth, you know, and I've always said, you know, if you're in a vehicle with a bunch of people, if you're not driving, you're just a fucking passenger.
You know, Joe, there's so much there too, because like, so when I did the scale in my head, I saw disenfranchised staff and entitled inmates. And the one thing I don't think any facility wants is disenfranchised staff versus entitled inmates. And then the question is, well, how did I connect that? Well, here's how I connected that in my head. How I connected that in my head is when you're disenfranchised, you become very, you lack the effort, you become very passive. And what happens here is when you lack effort to show resistance to things they shouldn't be doing, your lack of effort is pretty much allowing it, whether you verbally say it or not. Like, I'm not going to write that inmate a charge, even though I know he shouldn't be doing that. Okay, well, then you're allowing it. I mean, that's all it is. So now the problem is this, and this is where I thought the entitlement comes in, is when you do that for so long, they start to feel that these are things that they're able to do, that, these are things that however they earn, however it's a privilege they're now able to have. And then when someone comes in and decides to, what the hell's going on, and decides to regulate, these inmates actually believe that they're able to do these things because no one has stopped them before, and I think that's where it becomes a problem, because at that point, the person who's trying to get them to do the right thing has to go through a barrier that shouldn't be there. Like if Joe was an inmate and he's messing up, if I keep on top of him, no, and make sure he's not doing it, Joe doesn't get to put up that shield. I can get right to Joe each time. No. But if we allow it, Joe starts to build up a shield of what we call permissible behavior. Now, when I go and battle Joe, I got to battle through this whole shield of bullshit, which tires me out in the persistence of it all. Excuse me, it tires me out. And then all of a sudden, this is the truth, I wind up giving up because I no longer can get to Joe. If that makes any sense, I got to get to a shield first of bullshit because we've allowed that shield to now surface. Did I make a good metaphor right here, Joe? Does that picture make sense?
Absolutely. And I used to tell my staff, if you're walking the runs and you see something, you don't point it out. If you don't address it, you bless it. And, over time, like let's just take a seg unit, or a lockdown unit. When you're walking the runs, you allow them to have stuff covering up their cell windows. If we bless that and we don't address it, what's next? Then they're making tattoo guns. Then they're doing tattooing, or even worse. If we don't address it, we bless it, and the small things usually lead to the big things because we didn't address the small things from the get-go.
Joe, I got to add this. This may be something that I think we never really said on the show before, but it kind of relates to what you just said. Think about this. We may have said a part of this, but I have another perspective here just now that you made me think on. I'm an officer right now. I'm doing my rounds. I'm an officer, maybe new, so I'm chasing the rules, and maybe the regular officer is more lax in their ways, maybe disenfranchised, whatever the case may be, but definitely more lax in their effort to enforce the rules that need to be done. Let's just say that, the rules that you need to follow. So I got Joe, he's, tattooing another inmate, whatever, as I catch him and I say, yo, I'm writing you up, and of course the inmate now wants to avoid the charge. So, now they get into their defense mode, and usually the defense mode will be, well, Officer Russ Hamilton allows me to do these things. So he didn't say Officer Hamilton says yes. He just says Officer Hamilton allows me to do those things. So me, as a good rookie, I'm going to say, well, you know what? I'm going to go talk to Officer Hamilton and, whatever it is, see if that's true. So I go to talk to Officer Hamilton, and, Hamilton's let's say an older officer, just disgruntled, disenfranchised, whatever the reason would be for his lack of effort. But again, it's tough too, because when you have people that blame everything else for why they don't commit to what they're supposed to do, they don't look inwards and actually fix what needs to be done in order for them to be effective at the job. That's why the blame game, it kind of kills me a little bit, because the problem is you got to take responsibility to fix that, or there is a threat that you're allowing to exist. But either way, so I go to Russ and I say, hey, Russ, man, I was doing my rounds yesterday when I was working your unit. And a lot of inmates are saying that you allow them to, tattoo, use the tattoo machines, whatever it is. And he goes, man, I don't allow it. That's a bunch of bullshit. Well, they didn't say you verbally allow it, but let me ask you a question. Do you actually get involved and stop it? So if you're not stopping it physically, whatever you got to do, to make the attempt to stop it, whether it's addressing it or physically getting your hands involved, eventually you are allowing it. And the inmates will perceive it that way, because how many times when you think about it now, when they say that officer is allowing it, and then you go to that officer and you say, are you allowing that? The officer may say no, but then if you ask the officer one more question, well, are you doing anything to stop it? And that if that officer's an honest officer, no, you know what? I'm just not chasing after it anymore because every time I write them up, it doesn't stick. So you are allowing it. Remember, in corrections, guys, we chase conflict. If you're not like what Joe said, that's what made me think of that. If you're not, making the effort to stop it, then you're blessing it. Right? Wait, Joe, what's your thoughts on that? Because that was, I think that related perfectly well with what was the thing you said? If you're not something, you blessed it.
If you don't address it, you bless it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did that relate well to what I said? Did that relate well to that?
Absolutely. And that's why, it's so pertinent that we teach our rookie staff, regardless of the reasons that the inmate gives you, and we'll use that tattooing, for example. Rookie officer tells them to take the shield down, the cover over the window, and they find them tattooing, and they say Officer Russ Hamilton allows us to do it. I don't give a shit what Officer Russ Hamilton allows you to do. I'm telling you now, hand me that tattoo gun, and you're going to get a case for tattooing. I'm also writing you a case for possession of contraband. Regardless of the reasonings that the inmate gives you, we need to be addressing it right then, because the bigger question is, well, shit, how the hell did he get a tattoo gun to begin with? And if he's got a tattoo gun, what the hell else does he have in a cell? Shank, when was the last time we shook this cell down? It just, the little thing snowballs into the big things. And, in corrections, 80% of our problems we find totally by accident. We're not even looking for it. But just the cell in particular, all because I told him to take his cover down. I've uncovered a tattoo gun. I got 2 convicts with undocumented tattoos. Both of them are in possession of contraband. And then when I pull them out and separate them and go shake their cell down, I find a whole load of, contraband, and that's what I'm saying. If you don't address it, you bless it. If you don't address the small things, they turn into the big things. And that's the things that the leadership needs to be pushing downward to motivate these folks to look for these things. Because ultimately, the more that we push down, the more that we motivate them to find these things. These are the things that keep a unit running functionally and without operational issues.
I'm taking that thought right now. I'm actually going to add this to the book. But I actually said, just want to tell you what I'm at. I'm going to make a little chapter on this. Even though it's a leadership book, it's still a good thought to have. My first sentence for this is, when we become complacent in our ways, whether through negligence, being disenfranchised, or just plain out being mentally exhausted, what we don't address, we bless. And I'll get into the thought about, because I truly think that is a proper thing. If you got an inmate that's trying to say, yeah, well, he allows it. If you notice something, they're not lying to you. So sometimes you'll go back to the officer, and the officer says, well, I've never allowed that. We accept it because we don't ask the second question. Well, have you did anything to stop them from doing it? So think about it. The inmate didn't lie. The inmate's telling you the truth.
True.
So right. So I thought that was
but at the same time, we don't need to overlook it either, just because somebody may or may not have acted on it. You come across a tattoo gun, take it anyways. If Officer Russ Hamilton was the one that allowed him to do it, when Officer Russ Hamilton comes on the next card, let the inmates bitch Officer Russ Hamilton out. The main point is you did your job.
Yep. And I gotta, Joe, I just want to mention something before we come to a close. Like disenfranchised staff, that could be another thing where staff can kind of point everywhere else. And even though they may have reasons that are justified, I'm not minimizing that, but hear me out. I got to do what's right when I do these shows. And I got to tell you, if you point it outwards, then you can't solve it. So you have to bring it back inwards and take accountability for it. I got it in the book coming out about the blame game, which is the opposite of blame is accountability. And sometimes I tell people, you know what, if you have a problem that exists, whether it's yours or not, if you sit there and allow it to keep getting more complex without making an effort to do something, even if it's not within your wheelhouse, but it's a bad thing, so you just kind of let it, ignore it, you're also part of the problem. You could have you know, you could have issues right now where you go into a unit, you know something's wrong, but you're just like, you know what, I'm not even going to address it because you know why? I didn't do that anyway. I didn't put that inmate in a cell that they shouldn't be in or whatever it is. So when I get confronted on it, I become comforted in the excuse that my supervisor says, why is that inmate in there? Oh, because Joe did it. And then you get a supervisor that's going to turn around and say, I'm going to tell you something right now. I don't care who put it in. I'm holding people accountable for the now.
Yep.
Because the funny thing is, someone could put somebody, in this case, in that room by mistake. But the one thing that you cannot avoid is the negligence for ignoring it. And try blaming disenfranchisement. Try blaming that the whole world around you is falling apart. Because when you're being investigated, they'll listen to all that. Because at the end of the day, every time you point somewhere else, you're also saying that, yeah, you didn't do what you were supposed to be doing. Yep. So we'll be that comforted air. Oh man, that's horrible. Wow, I can't believe management did that and all this other stuff. And we'll listen for as long as it's got to be because now we got the admission. But then they're going to still ask you at the end of that, I'm sorry. Hey, I got to ask you something, Joe. What did you do, though, to stop it once you noticed that this was all happening? Yeah. And I don't want that happening to any one of you guys. So again, if you guys notice that you're not feeling right and the first thing you do is look outward for a chance to maybe understand what's happening, but it's still going to kind of push you away from taking immediate control, you got to shift that. Because if you don't, you will get stuck in the blame game. You'll take no accountability, and then you will gradually accept things for the way they are and not where your impact really should be. Again, effort over outcome. Joe, you have any closing thoughts on everything that we just said here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was a lot there. It was a good dialogue. It's, in the grand scheme of things, it's easy to turn a right into a wrong. And it takes a special kind of individual, regardless of whether it's a CO or a leader or an administrator, to take a wrong and turn it into a right. We can blame everybody around us, but it doesn't on the case in point, it doesn't affect the now. We're the ones that are there. They're not. What do we need to do to get this thing back on track? What do we need to do? And again, we've been saying it through this dialogue, if you don't address it, you bless it. Don't allow to get yourself, disenfranchised to the point where you're going down a rabbit hole of, emotional complacency. At some point, if we don't step back and take a look at ourselves and find a way to motivate ourselves, I've seen people crash and burn. Just on it. I mean, nothing physical going on in the environment. It's all emotional. They let things get to them so much that they want to spiral and out of control and going down this rabbit hole to the point where, they're physically ill when they have to go in to do this job. That's not anybody's fault. That's on us. We're the ones that created that for ourselves. Granted, the outward pressure may sometimes lead to it, but ultimately we're responsible for us. I'll be damned if I'm going to let somebody above me dictate my emotional well-being and my initiative, dedication, and loyalty that I have to this job in this profession. Regardless, we're never going to see eye to eye on everything. And as leaders, we're never going to make anybody happy. We're not going to make everybody happy. If you think you're going to walk into a facility and get everybody in total agreement with you, you're freaking dreaming. That's why, we always talk about chasing the conflict. With conflict comes discussion. With discussion comes a clear understanding for all parties involved. But that's up to us as individuals, not the people around us, not the people above us, not the people below us. Us as individuals. We're the ones that are responsible for that. As managers and leaders, yes, it's our responsibility to help motivate. But I'm not the one that's kicking you out of bed every day. I'm not the one that's dressing you. I'm not the one that's putting you in your car to drive you to work. I'm not the one that's feeding you. You're doing that. And if you've gotten that far, you should have enough initiative left in you to do the job correctly. That shouldn't be something that I have to tell you. That shouldn't be something that Gangi has to tell you. We shouldn't have to remind you over and over and over. And if it's because of a problem within the facility, bring it up to your supervisor. 9 times out of 10, they don't know what the hell is going on if you don't bring it to their attention. We can't fix what we don't know.
Yeah.
And when it comes to little things, just because Officer Gangi allowed this inmate so and so to do something in the day room for an extra hour, that doesn't mean we have to allow it. If it's a violation, address it. Don't use somebody else's laziness or somebody else's complacency as a reason for you to look the other way. That's not your job. It's your job to regulate, to enforce rules and regulations, regardless of who does what. And as long as you're within the boundaries of policy and black and white policy, you don't have to worry about it.
Joe, I love what you're saying, because I think that when you have staff, and guys, I just want to mention it one more time, just so I want people to know that I am empathetic. But having said that, when we still kind of look towards the outside, blaming them, there's still no effort to fix the matter. So when you have staff that don't make the effort and all they do is blame, then it's not a reason that they're giving you. They're giving you excuses.
Excuses, absolutely.
Yeah. Reasons generate when there is an effort and there's a constant and strong effort, but you just can't make ground, and that becomes a reason. But an excuse is lack of effort. And then saying, well, I can't do nothing about it. Why? And then you go and mention everybody else being the problem, and then you don't mention anything that you're doing to take the initiative, and you just slowly settle. So I think one thing here is also knowing the difference between an excuse and a reason. Usually excuses come on the back end of lack of effort.
Yep.
Reason comes from on the back end of an exhaustive effort, but you just can't gain ground to go forward. And I think disenfranchised, I get it, but we had to get heartfelt dialogue here, because if we don't, and we don't put the ball where it needs to be, even if there is going to be some people that disagree, then what we're putting down here really doesn't have any value. So we had to cross into that area where, yes, you are responsible for part of that. And even Joe said 60, I said 70. It still puts the ball in your court. I don't care if it was 51-49.
Yeah.
But the good thing about that, and what came across, is that, management's a part of it, but they may not be the solution to it. I just want to mention that, because if you rely on management to be the solution, then you're going to sit back and wait for that solution to come. Yeah. Oh, good luck. Good luck. That's all I'm saying. Good luck on that. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.